The regular season is behind us. It is time for the NFL playoffs. Johnny Talk Sports here to bring you my NFL Wildcard weekend predictions. And I am not going to waste any more time. I am going straight into the picks. Kicking things off with our very first matchup of Wildcard weekend, Seahawks and 49ers. The 49ers, they're the hottest team entering the playoffs, winners of 10 straight games. The Seahawks, they have lost 5 out of their last 8 games, but they did win their final 2 games of the regular season, and they got some help from the Lions to put themselves in this spot. And sometimes it doesn't matter how you got into the playoffs, it's just more important that you're there. Because we have seen teams in the past that fly under the radar and make deep runs and even winning the Super Bowl. But I'm not saying the Seahawks are going to win the Super Bowl. In fact, I do think the 49ers, they're going to win this game. I will point that out right off the bat. But I do think eventually when you look at the numbers and analytics, I think there is going to be an equalizer for the Seahawks, which I'll get to in a moment. As I already mentioned, 49ers, they're the hottest team in the league entering the playoffs. The Seahawks, I would say they're the weakest team entering the playoffs. Losers of 5 of their last 8 games. They've given up an average of 150.2 rushing yards per game in the regular season. In the 2 matchups against San Francisco in the regular season, the Seahawks defense allowed 189 and 170 rushing yards. The 49ers, they are first in total defense, first in turnover margin. They're fifth in total offense. And this 49ers team, believe it or not, it reminds me of the Georgia Bulldogs that just won the national championship. As the Bulldogs, they're like the 49ers in a way, at least I think so in my opinion, because the 49ers, we mainly focus on their defense. We don't really talk about the offense that much as we do the defense. They're fifth in total offense. And George Hill against the Seahawks in his last 2 games, 13 catches, 274 yards, 4 touchdowns. For the 49ers to win the Super Bowl, there's going to be a point where Brock Purdy is going to have to make plays. The 49ers, they can't be heavily reliant on the run game down the stretch. For this week, they can because the Seahawks, they have the worst run defense out of all the playoff teams. So I think this is going to be a game that the 49ers, they assert the run game. But I do want to point out the Seahawks, they held their own in that second matchup. They found themselves behind, but they had a chance to try to come back and force overtime in that game to maybe even steal that game from San Francisco. But they gave up a long run play to Jordan Mason, which ended the game. And I think the equalizer here for the Seahawks, Georgia's pass defense was the weakest part of their team this season. The 49ers pass defense is the weakest part of their team. They're 20th in pass defense. And in the 2 matchups against San Francisco in the regular season, Tyler Lockett had 16 receptions for 175 yards in those 2 games. So I think if Geno Smith can make plays down the field early in this matchup, I think the Seahawks, they have a chance to pull a massive upset. But I'm going with the 49ers in this one. But I do think there is an equalizer for the Seahawks, and that is Geno Smith making plays, asserting Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf early and often in this matchup. But I just can't see it. I just think the 49ers, I think they're going to continue that momentum they had to end the season, and they win 11 in a row. Matchup number 2 of Wild Card Weekend, Chargers and Jaguars. This is a pick'em right now. A rematch from Week 3 where the Jaguars won 38-10. And there is something that sticks out to me about that 30-10 score, which I'll get to in a little bit. But there are massive question marks to Brandon Staley's name on why he made the decision to play his starters in a meaningless Week 18 matchup against the Broncos. The only explanation you could possibly have for that is to perhaps try to gain momentum and confidence for next week. Considering they're going up against a team that absolutely beat them up 38-10 towards the beginning of the year. The Jaguars, they're 7-2 in their last 9 games, while the Chargers, they should consider themselves lucky. They avoided major injuries from Mike Williams and Joey Bosa, as they both got injured in that Week 18 matchup, but they both should be available to play in that game on Saturday. The Chargers are third in passing offense, while the Jaguars are 28th in pass defense. And this 30-10 game in Week 3 should not define the Chargers in this matchup, because the Chargers, they're a much healthier team now than that Week 3 game. As Week 3, that was the game where Justin Herbert was coming off a ribs injury, and he was still dealing with that ribs injury, but he still toughed it out and played through a ribs injury. But he is healthier now. Keenan Allen was not in that game. Keenan Allen's healthy now. Joey Bosa's healthy now. They're getting Rashawn Slater back. So the Chargers, they're getting healthier, and that is a big element that you need to have to make a playoff run. And could this Chargers team go on a Bengals-type run, where a team that flies under the radar, we don't necessarily expect to make a run, but they make a run? I could see out of this Chargers team, and I am going with the Chargers to win this game, even though the Jaguars, they're coming with a lot of confidence. But they just squeaked by in Week 18 against the Titans, against a third-string quarterback. So I'm going with the Chargers in this matchup. But I do want to point out that this game, I think, is going to be a hard-fought game that will come down to the wire, but the Chargers win a close one. Dolphins and Bills. Will Tua Tagovailoa be the quarterback this Sunday afternoon? The Dolphins quarterback situation is unknown. Will it be Tua Tagovailoa? Will it be Teddy Bridgewater or Skylar Thompson? Now, in the 2 games in the regular season between these 2 teams, they've been hard-fought games, fought all the way down to the wire. Game 1, the Dolphins won 21-19. In Game 2, the Bills won 32-29, with a game-winning field goal at the horn by Tyler Bass. Now, I think Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are going to be mismatches in this matchup for the Bills' defense. And I've gone on and on for the last 2 months about how I find the Bills' defense iffy at this point in the season. Well, I do think there's going to be a point in the playoffs where these injuries to the Bills' defense is going to haunt them at some point. Micah Hyde's out for the year. Von Miller's out for the year. Two big presences in the defense. And I just think without them, at some point in the playoffs, it's going to haunt them. And they'll be really missing those guys. If Tua isn't the quarterback in this game, then I think the Bills should win easily. But if he is, I like the Dolphins to have a really good shot of pulling off this upset. I do think that if Tua plays in this game, it's going to be yet another hard-fought game to finish between these 2 teams. If Tua plays, I expect Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to both have over 100 yards receiving. But if he doesn't, and we see Skylar Thompson, I just think it's going to be a long afternoon for the Dolphins. If we see Teddy Bridgewater, I think the Dolphins might be able to be in it for a while, but the Bills will pull away in the second half. But I'm going with the Bills whether Tua is in or out. I think if Tua's in, I think we're going to see another hard-fought game down to the wire, but the Bills win it late. But with Tua out, Teddy Bridgewater, Bills will pull away in the second half, even though the Dolphins will make it a game. But if it's Skylar Thompson, I expect the Bills to absolutely dominate against this Dolphins team. So Bills win no matter what, and they move on to the next round. Giants and Vikings. Now this game, just like every other game this week, is a rematch. In Week 16, the Vikings won 27-24. off of a Greg Joseph game-winning 61-yard field goal. The Giants, they held their own in that game, even if all the numbers won't stay that. Their pass defense was atrocious in that game. Justin Jefferson had 12 catches, 133 yards, and a touchdown. T.J. Hawkinson had 13 catches, 109 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But the Giants' run defense held the Vikings in check. They held them to 4.4 yards per carry in that matchup. The Vikings are 31st in total defense. They have one of the worst defenses in the entire league. And they take on a Giants team that held their own in that matchup. And I think the Giants, they're going to take what they learned in that match in Week 16. If the Giants, if they can force Kirk Cousins to make some bad throws, make bad plays, if they can hold Jefferson in check, have somebody else other than Justin Jefferson beat you in this matchup, you'll take your chances with Adam Thielen or KJ Osborne. As I'd say the Vikings, I think they are definitely top 4 in the league as far as receiving cores in the entire league. As Jefferson's the best receiver in the league. Adam Thielen, he's a solid number 1 on the majority of NFL rosters. KJ Osborne is underrated. I feel like he gets undervalued, underappreciated. But KJ Osborne has had moments this season where he has risen to the occasion. But the fact that the Vikings, they have been escaping a lot of these games they played this season. I believe it's 11 games this season where they've won by 1 possession, where it feels like the Vikings either win by 1 possession or they get absolutely ran out of the stadium. I think the Giants, they are going to win this matchup. I think it's going to be a 31-27 type of game. I just think the Vikings winning all these games in close fashion, I think they're setting themselves up to lose in a very, very shameful ending. As it's typical for the Vikings to lose in very, very shameful endings. As there is a laundry list of playoff losses where the Vikings have lost in very shameful endings. I think this Sunday is going to be no different. I did say in the beginning of the year, I think the Giants' defense is going to be very underrated with them bringing in Wink Martindale from the Ravens. And there's been moments where the Giants, they've had pretty good defense. It is kind of shaky, but the majority of defense in the league are pretty shaky as well. But I think their Giants defense will be good enough in this matchup to upset the Vikings. Sunday night in prime time, the Ravens and the Bengals. Now, the big question mark for this game already, is Lamar Jackson going to be in or out for the Ravens? Now, last week, the Ravens, they had a chance to force a coin flip to try to host this matchup. But it would not have worked in their favor, even if they would have won, because the Chargers, they lost later in the day. But I think even if they went after it in that game, it would not have mattered. They rested some key players. And even if they all played, I think the Bengals, they would have won anyway. As Joe Burrow and the Bengals absolutely dominated. And I do want to point out, I think this Bengals team is a lot better than the team last year that completely flew under the radar. But I do want to point out there is some pressure on the Bengals now this time around. As last year, we did not expect the Bengals to make a run. But this season, we have high expectations for them. They're the second hottest team in the playoffs. Well, second hottest team entering the playoffs behind the 49ers. So, if Lamar Jackson is out for the Ravens, how are they going to pull off this upset? They're third in run defense. So that is something that is in their favor. But it doesn't help that the Bengals, they're seventh in run defense. As the Ravens, they're a team that likes to run the football, and they run the football pretty well. They have over the years. They're 24th in pass defense, so that can be an equalizer. Until you realize the Ravens are 26th in pass defense. So no matter who starts at quarterback for the Ravens, whether it be Lamar Jackson, Tyler Huntley, or Anthony Brown, I think the Bengals, they win this game pretty handily. as this Bengals team, they're on a revenge tour. They fell just short of winning the Super Bowl just last season when they flew under the radar. But now the Bengals, they're one of the favorites. And I think the Bengals, they absolutely dominate this game. Lamar Jackson would only give the Ravens a better chance, but Bengals on top in this game. The question is by how much. I'd say at least 2 touchdowns minimum. I think Jamar Chase has a big game against this Ravens secondary. I think T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd also get involved. I do think that Joe Mixon, however, will get contained in this matchup, but we'll see. Our final game of Wildcard weekend, the Cowboys and Buccaneers. Now, in week 1, the Buccaneers won by a score of 19-3. The Cowboys defense, they kept the Cowboys in that game as it could have been a lot worse. As the Cowboys defense, they bended but they didn't break. They were holding the Buccaneers to field goal opportunities constantly in that matchup. Now, what have I seen throughout this entire weekend when it was going to be pretty much known the Cowboys were going to play the Bucs? They look back at the week 1 loss and they blame it on Dak getting injured in that game. But here's what nobody wants to talk about. It was already 19-3 with 5 minutes left in that game when the game was pretty much in theory decided. Even if Dak would have been staying in that game and he didn't get injured, the Buccaneers are still going to win that game. There is no doubt in my mind that would have been the case. But I want to point out something that I saw on Reddit. And I get that it's Reddit, but I found this kind of interesting. This is a sports bettor that shows a picture of a receipt he had where he correctly said on January 15th of 2022 where the Rams would beat the Bengals in Super Bowl 56. And then I commented on this, saying whoever the NFL wants to win will win, because let's just face it, whoever they want to win will probably win. Exactly. The question is, who does the NFL want to win and why? And this Reddit user says the Cowboys, because the Cowboys only have a chance if everyone thinks they don't. And they play their worst when their fans don't shut up. Which, honestly, that's really, really realistic, because every year it's the Cowboys fans saying this is their year. But I digress. Of course, the Bills will also make it to the Super Bowl for the sake of the DeMar story, not to mention these are the best 2 defenses in the league, regardless of what the Cowboys showed last week, referring to the Week 18 loss against the Commanders. Or I should say the Redskins, because they're going to always be the Redskins to me. Like a magician, you are not supposed to know where the trick is happening, and that's why the Cowboys are perfectly under the radar, just like the Bengals were last year. I mean, the Cowboys and Bills makes a great throwback-style bowl, all blue and white. Stories on both sides with big fan bases of historic franchises. I think just like the poetry of the past, the Bills make a big run and look great just to lose in heartbreaking fashion. The perfect story in my opinion, and America's team gets a win. Not to mention underdog in the Super Bowl hasn't won the Super Bowl since Eagles versus Pats. Referring to Super Bowl 52 where Nick Foles beat Tom Brady and the Patriots. Well, I take information that I find on the internet to really be humorous. And I said since the beginning of the year, the Buccaneers are my Super Bowl pick. And even though the Buccaneers, they have not looked good throughout the majority of the year, that Week 17 match against the Panthers, I think that was a massive confidence booster. The fact that the starters only played at the beginning of the game, I think they need to get some confidence going into this matchup, and I think they have the confidence. I'm going with the Buccaneers to win this game. I think that it's going to be one of those games that's going to be fought very hard from start to finish. I think it's going to really be a lot like the Rams-Buccaneers game from earlier in the season, where the Buccaneers and Tom Brady, they engineer a game-winning drive in the final 2 minutes of that game, and the Buccaneers win a very low-scoring game. And that will do it for my wild card weekend predictions. Comment your predictions in the comment section. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. As always, have a wonderful day and enjoy wild card weekend.